I want you to do something before you keep watching. Think back to your very first paycheck. Now compare it to what you earn today. For most people, that number has doubled, tripled, maybe even gone up 5 times. Now ask yourself, has your actual wealth grown at the same rate? If the answer is no, if your income went up, but your savings, your assets, your real financial freedom barely moved, you're not alone. This is the reality for millions of people who've worked for 10, 15 years, gotten regular raises, and yet their net worth has basically stood still. And here's the scary part. It's not because they're lazy. It's not because they lack ability. It's because they've been playing a financial game their entire life without ever being taught the real rules. Today, I'm not going to talk about budgeting tricks or cutting your morning coffee. I'm going to talk about something deeper and far more important: the true nature of money and why misunderstanding it keeps millions of hard-working people stuck in the exact same spot year after year. If you've ever felt like you're working hard, sometimes to the point of exhaustion, but the money never seems like enough, this video is for you. Stick around, because the middle section is the most important part, and it might completely change the way you see money. Most of us grew up believing something simple. Being poor means your salary is too low. If you earned more, everything would automatically get better. This belief sounds completely reasonable, and that's exactly why it's so dangerous. A wrong belief that sounds reasonable can survive for years without anyone ever questioning it. But there's a well-documented phenomenon studied across many countries. A large number of lottery winners, people who suddenly receive a massive lump sum of money, end up back in financial trouble within just a few years. Sometimes worse off than before they won, because they were used to a certain spending level and never learned how to manage large amounts of wealth. Why would someone who suddenly has millions in their hands end up poor again? The answer has nothing to do with how much money they had. It has everything to do with how they thought about money and how they handled it. If the underlying mindset doesn't change, it doesn't matter how much money you hand someone, the outcome eventually returns to where it started. This applies directly to the average working person. I used to believe that if my salary doubled, my wealth would double too. But that's not what happens in reality. Income goes up, and almost immediately, spending rises right along with it, in a way that feels completely natural and is very hard to notice. You move into a slightly nicer apartment. You eat at slightly better restaurants. You upgrade to the latest phone. Each individual decision feels reasonable, feels like a fair reward for your effort. But added together, by the end of the month, your account balance is back near zero, just at a higher standard of living. This phenomenon has a name in behavioral finance: lifestyle inflation. And this is the very first trap, the most common one of all, that almost everyone falls into at least once without ever realizing it. So if the real cause isn't a low salary, where does the problem actually lie? To answer that fully, we can't just look at the numbers on a paycheck. We need to go back to a more fundamental question, almost philosophical, but it's the single most important question in this entire video. What is money, really? Most of us were taught, directly or indirectly, that money is a reward for effort. The logic seems simple. You work, you get paid, you use that pay to live. That sounds completely true, and to some extent it is. But this is only half the truth. And it's that missing half the part nobody ever explains that keeps so many people stuck for years, sometimes for an entire working life. Truth number 1. Money is a tool for exchanging value, not a fixed reward for time. When you go to work and get paid by the hour or by the month, what you're actually selling is a very special asset: your time. And here's the problem: time is the one asset on earth with a hard limit that can never be purchased more of. Every person, rich or poor, gets exactly 24 hours a day. You cannot work 48 hours in a day to earn double. You cannot buy extra hours from anyone else. When your income is tied entirely to the hours you put in, that income automatically has an invisible ceiling. You can work overtime. You can earn certifications to raise your hourly rate. But fundamentally, you're still operating inside a system with a built-in limit. This is exactly why so many people work incredibly hard, constant overtime, taking on extra work, pushing themselves to exhaustion, and still don't see their wealth grow in proportion to that effort. They're pouring all their energy into optimizing something that was capped from the very beginning. Truth number 2. There are two fundamentally different types of income: active income and asset income. Active income is money you earn only while you are actively working. The moment you stop because you quit, because you're sick, because you retire, that income stops instantly, with no exceptions. Asset income is money your assets generate for you, without requiring you to directly trade your time for it. It's interest from investments, dividends from stocks, rental income from real estate, or profit from a business that runs without needing your presence every single hour. This distinction sounds simple, but it's the single most important dividing line in the entire story of personal finance. People who remain permanently poor, no matter how high their current salary is, typically have only one type of income for their entire working life: active income. People who become permanently wealthy, on the other hand, build both types of income side by side, and over time, the proportion of asset income in their total income keeps growing, until eventually asset income alone is enough to cover their entire lifestyle. This is, in essence, what people call financial freedom. Truth number 3, and this is the most important truth of all: money doesn't multiply in the hands of the spender. It only multiplies in the hands of the asset owner. Picture the flow of money through the economy in the simplest possible way. When you get paid and spend most of it on shopping, food, and entertainment, that money flows from you to businesses, supermarkets, phone manufacturers, landlords, entertainment platforms. The businesses and individuals receiving that flow of money don't let it sit idle. They use it to open new branches, buy more real estate, invest further in stocks or new technology, continuing to build wealth and generate even larger future income for themselves. Meanwhile, you, the spender, after that money leaves your hands, remain exactly where you started, waiting for the next paycheck to repeat the exact same cycle. You don't get to keep any share of the asset value that your own spending helped create for someone else. This is the deepest truth about money that almost nobody teaches you in school, and it's rarely spoken about clearly even within families. Money is a continuous flow through the economy. And within that flow, at every single transaction, there are always two sides. One side accumulating more assets, and the other side transferring value away without receiving any asset in return. If you don't actively position yourself on the side of the asset owner through investing, through building income that isn't entirely dependent on your personal time, you will, by default, end up on the other side, someone who continuously creates value for others without holding on to much of it yourself. And the troubling part is that this process happens completely silently, with no warning bell, no alarm going off. You only notice it years later, looking back and wondering why you're still standing in exactly the same place you started. Now that we understand the true nature of money, let's get specific. Exactly why do so many hardworking people, maybe you, maybe people you know, stay stuck in this cycle no matter how long they work? There are 4 common traps, and chances are you're caught in at least one of them right now, even without realizing it. The first trap: you're pouring almost 100% of your energy into selling your time overtime, extra projects, more certifications for a raise, while putting almost zero energy into building assets in parallel. There is nothing wrong with this when you're just starting your career. When your financial capital is still limited and focusing on professional growth makes sense. But the real problem shows up when 10, 15 years go by and you're still in the exact same position, a single source of income, still selling all your time with no asset quietly working on your behalf. This is a particularly dangerous cycle because it has no natural end point. Your salary might keep rising steadily over the years. Your age keeps rising too, but your health and energy for selling time at a high intensity will eventually decline. And the day you can no longer or are no longer allowed to sell your time, whether due to retirement, layoffs, or health issues, your income drops close to zero almost instantly, no matter how high your previous salary was. The people who escape this trap are the ones who, while still working a regular job, started setting aside a portion of their income, even a small one, and converting it into assets, index funds, shares in solid companies, or building a side income stream that doesn't depend directly on the hours they spend at a desk. What matters isn't a huge amount of money right away, it's starting early and staying consistent. The second trap is far more subtle because it doesn't show up in big financial decisions. It hides inside hundreds of tiny decisions every single month. We often spend money not because we truly need something, but because we want to feel successful. To feel like we're keeping pace with friends, co-workers, or the images we see on social media. A new phone gets purchased while the old one still works perfectly fine. A car gets traded in while the old one still runs smoothly, just because it feels like time for an upgrade. A luxurious vacation beyond what's actually affordable, simply because friends online appear to be enjoying similar trips. This isn't a matter of personal weakness or poor moral character. It's a well-documented psychological phenomenon. The human brain is wired to constantly compare its own position to the people around it. And every time we spend money to make ourselves look fine or look successful, the brain receives a short burst of satisfaction. But that feeling fades quickly. And within days or weeks, the feeling of lacking something returns, fueling the next round of spending. The consequence of this cycle is clear. You go to work to earn money, then use that very money to buy a temporary feeling of being fine in other people's eyes, and the portion of income that could have built long-term wealth gets swept into this emotional spending cycle year after year, while you barely notice just how large the total cost really adds up to. The third trap is a major paradox, and arguably the most dangerous of the four. A huge number of people are more afraid of losing money through investing than they are of staying poor for their entire lives. They keep all their savings sitting in a low-interest savings account, with the familiar reasoning, investing is too risky. What if I lose money? But what they don't realize is that letting money sit idle without earning real returns for 20 or 30 years is also a form of risk. It's just a slower, quieter kind of risk than watching a stock chart turn red. Inflation still silently eats away at the real value of that money every single year, even though they never see the number drop directly, the way they would on an investment chart. This is exactly why this type of risk is so dangerous. It doesn't create the immediate fear that an investment loss does, so it never triggers any action to change course, even though the long-term damage can end up far greater. This fear isn't an unchangeable personality trait you're born with. It almost always comes from a lack of understanding about how proper long-term investing works, how diversification reduces risk, and the difference between disciplined long-term investing and risky short-term speculation. Someone who genuinely understands the basics of long-term investing stops being blindly afraid and avoiding it altogether. They learn to respect risk without letting it paralyze every financial decision they make. And here is the fourth trap, rarely talked about, but hugely influential. Never setting a clear definition of how much money, how many assets, would actually be enough for the life you want to live. Without a specific target number, without a clear picture of the financial life you're working toward, every financial decision becomes a reaction to the moment, rather than part of an intentional long-term plan. You don't know exactly what you're saving for, so it becomes very easy to abandon saving the moment any spending temptation shows up. You don't know what level of wealth would actually give you real freedom, so even as your assets grow, you keep feeling like it's not enough. Keep comparing yourself to people who have more, and never experience genuine financial peace of mind even after reaching milestones that, on paper, are quite significant. So, now that we understand the true nature of money and the four most common traps, the most important question is, what do we actually do next? I'm not going to give you grand, unrealistic advice like quit your job today and chase financial freedom. That's irresponsible advice that doesn't fit most people watching this video. Instead, here are 4 practical, concrete steps that anyone with a regular job, regardless of current salary, can start applying today. Step 1. Pay your future self before you spend anything else. The moment you get paid, automatically transfer a portion, even just 10 or 15% of your income, into a separate investment account, completely apart from the account you use for daily spending. Don't wait until the end of the month to see how much is left over to save, because in almost every case, there won't be anything left. Step 2. Learn to let money work for you, instead of working for money your entire life. Start learning the basics of investment options that fit your situation: index funds, shares in solid companies or real estate if your finances allow for it. You don't need to become an expert overnight. What matters most is starting, even with a small amount, and staying consistent and patient over many years. Step 3. Clearly separate spending meant to make you feel fine in other people's eyes, from spending on things that genuinely matter to you. Before any major purchase, pause for a moment and ask yourself, am I buying this because I truly need it and it serves the life I actually want, or just because I want others to see me as successful? This simple question applied consistently can save you a significant amount of money every year, money that would otherwise be spent on things that don't add any lasting value. Step 4. Define a clear number and a clear picture of what enough means for you, specifically. Take the time to think carefully. What level of wealth, what amount of asset income would actually give you real safety and freedom? What does your ideal life look like, down to the details? Once you have a clear picture and a clear number, everyday financial decisions become far easier. Because you're no longer reacting randomly to circumstances, you're steadily moving toward a destination you've already defined. If you've made it this far, I want you to remember the single most important thing from this entire video. You are not poor because you're lazy. You are not poor because you're less capable than other people. There is a good chance you're in your current financial situation simply because you were never taught the true nature of money, and you've been playing a lifelong financial game without ever knowing its real rules. Now, after these 15 minutes, you know those rules. The question that remains, and it's the most important question of all, is this: will you keep selling all of your time forever without building anything else alongside it? Or will you start, even with one small step today, to gradually become an asset owner instead of someone who only ever creates value for others? If this video changed the way you think about money, let me know in the comments which of these 4 steps you're going to start. And if you found this helpful, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next video, where we'll go even deeper into the psychology and true nature of money.